Welcome to another edition of From the Woods Today. I'm Renee Williams, and I'm an information specialist with the Department of Forestry and Natural Resources, and I'm here with my co-host, Billy Thomas.
Hi, Renee. As you said, I'm Billy Thomas, an extension forester here at the Department of Forestry and Natural Resources at the University of Kentucky, and we're so excited to have you all with us for another episode of From the Woods Today.
Definitely. We have a very nice lineup today. If you've ever wanted to know about mushrooms, you have found the right place. We have Dr. Ellen Crocker coming in to talk about that.
Yeah, I am so excited about this episode. We get so many questions here at the Department of Forestry and Natural Resources Extension about mushrooms. What can we eat, what is safe, and all of that, and how to cultivate them. So Dr. Crocker is going to be talking about mushrooms. She's going to give us a good overview of mushroom and talk about some mushroom production. But she's also got two special guests that are going to be joining her, Renee. She's going to have Jack Stickney, who is a woodland owner in Estill County. He's also a prolific mushroom producer, and he was former Tree Farmer of the Year here in the state of Kentucky, as well as many other kind of forestry related awards. So we're excited to hear about Jack and his operation. And she's also going to have Mary McCarty on there. Mary, county agent in Menifee County, and she's going to be talking about a great project that she's been doing dealing with mushrooms as well. So Ellen, they'll be kind of showcasing both of those folks and talking about mushrooms overall, and then we'll have Ellen on after that segment if you all got questions. So be thinking about your mushroom questions for Ellen, and we'll get those to her. So Ellen, thanks for putting this together with the team. I really appreciate that. Following Ellen's, we're going to be doing the Tree of the Week. This is one of my favorite trees. You know, I say that every week, Renee, but they all are kind of my favorite. But this one,
like I said, we're in forestry. All of them are our favorites.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about black locust. It's kind of an early pioneer species, but it's really important and plays some really important roles here in our forests. Laurie Thomas is going to be talking about the Tree of the Week, which is the black locust. And then we're going to follow up that segment with one on garlic mustard. It's a really special week for invasive plants, if there can be such a thing. And Ellen will be talking about that as well. So we got a great show, and I'm so excited that everybody's here with us.
Right, so without further ado, Dr. Crocker, if you'd like to go ahead and talk about mushrooms.
All right. Wonderful. Well, it's always my pleasure to talk a little bit about mushrooms. You know, I like to say I might not be the world expert on mushrooms, but I am an evangelical mycophile, so someone who loves mushrooms and likes to share that love of mushrooms with others. So happy to have you all here. And I know that it's that time of year where you're starting to see a lot of mushrooms popping up. So I figured I'd start us out with a little segment on what mushrooms are you seeing right now? Or perhaps maybe what mushrooms have you seen over the past couple months? So this project is especially fun because I actually kind of had some students in a forest health class do this semester, and I used some of their photos here. So you might see their names at the bottom, but that's a kind of fun activity you could do with a group that you're working with. Just looking around and seeing what you can find and trying to identify it. So if you're lucky, you might have found some morels this spring. So this is one of the choice edible mushrooms that people hunt for every spring. There are several different species, and they're pretty easy to identify. So they're kind of one of the go-to mushrooms to forage, not to mention the fact that they're delicious. If you, like me, however, did not have any morel success, you're not alone. I hear it was a pretty poor year for morels, although maybe I'm just a poor morel hunter. But you still might have seen some other really neat mushrooms. You might have seen some cup fungi. So this is one that we see a lot in the spring. I see when I'm looking for morels, but instead I find these devil's urns, which are kind of these black cup mushrooms that open up, and you can see kind of make that cup-like shape. Maybe a different cup fungus, scarlet cup fungus. These are kind of a brilliant red orange color. And both of these look a little different from your average mushroom that you might buy in the grocery store, right? Instead of having gills on the underside, they have this cup shape. So mushrooms come in all sorts of different shapes, sizes, forms. So another thing you might have seen would be some of these polypores. So here I've got a picture of turkey tail and a picture of the pheasant's backs that have been popping up everywhere. Both of these, if we were to flip them over and look on the underside, would have tiny little pores instead of having the gills that you might see on your supermarket mushrooms. again, you might see fungi looking really weird. So here's one of witch's butter, which is kind of a yellow jelly fungus that dries out. It becomes very small. You wouldn't see it, but once it rains or is moist, it'll kind of hydrate and become really gelatinous. And then the cracked cap polypore, if you've got black locust around, there's no doubt that you've seen this one. It's really woody and hard, so different in texture than you might think of. And then just in the past week or so, I've started seeing reports of some chicken of the woods, so gotten a few emails about that. Most of the time you'll see them and they'll have this yellow-orange color, but sometimes they'll have this lighter color. This is actually a separate species that we have in this area, but both of them are pretty popular for looking for. So this is just a tiny slice of the great diversity of fungi that are out there, some of which, like the morels, you might eat, some of which you definitely shouldn't eat, and some that why would you bother trying? So kind of everything in between. But one of the most fun things about looking for mushrooms and fungi is just the extreme diversity. So many other species, so many other things that you can find out there. So to get us started though, it might be helpful to talk about what is a mushroom, because I'm talking about mushrooms. And I think when most people think of mushrooms, they think of this, you know, the kind that you get in the supermarket, those supermarket mushrooms. But really, that's kind of just a tiny percentage of the really great diversity of different fungi that are out there. So what is a mushroom? A mushroom is the fruiting body of a fungus. So the fungus itself is living, it's eating, it's doing all of the work. And then every now and then they'll send up these mushrooms which produce spores that the fungi use to reproduce and spread. So think of it this way, if you're thinking of your mushroom, the fruit, it's just the tip of the iceberg. So you might be able to see it, it might be really obvious, but what you can't see is the rest of the fungus. And that's really the body of that fungus, that's mycelium, and that's the vegetative growing structure. So the mushrooms, they're ephemeral, they come and they go, and they're the part that we care about because sometimes there's the ones that people eat, but the fungus itself is a living organism. It's living in something, it's eating that thing, and it's growing, and it's sending up those mushrooms kind of in the same way that a tree might produce fruit. So with that, then the question is, okay, well, we know what a mushroom is. How about what is a fungus? So we talked about this vegetative growing structure, and here you can see a picture of it. It kind of looks like threads, little filaments that are growing through different substrates, whether it's wood or maybe a leaf litter, and that is the growing part of the fungus. That's what's eating. So fungi are like us, they need to be eating their food. They don't photosynthesize like plants, so they need to eat something, and that's the main part of the fungus. But again, they're going to be producing these fruiting bodies, these mushrooms, and those mushrooms produce spores that maybe will land somewhere and germinate and start the cycle over again. So a lot of people ask me, oh, well, fungi, they're plants, right? No, they're in their own separate kingdom. We're actually probably more closely related to them in some ways than plants. We both have to eat our food. We don't make our own food from the sun. So they're in their own separate group, and they're really diverse. So they are everything from mushrooms to the molds to, I know some of you have been making sourdough in this quarantine situation. So all the yeasts that we're using made from fungi as well. So they cover a really broad range of different things. And I think one thing that's surprising to most people is that relatively few fungi make mushrooms. We're talking mushrooms today, so we're interested in those, but relatively few actually make those. Just keep that in mind. They're doing all sorts of things in our environment that we might not even realize. The number one thing that fungi do is that they're nature's recyclers. They're breaking down dead plant material and making it accessible again. So whether that's logs or leaf litter, straw, something else, but they can also be pathogens of plants, of trees. That's one of the things that I'm very interested in, but also of insects, of humans, of animals. They can be mutualists. They can be beneficial to plants as well. So they really play a broad role. So let's talk a little bit more about cultivated mushrooms. So the most commonly cultivated woodland mushroom in our area is shiitake. It's the main species because it can be really reliably grown on logs outdoors, but it's not the only one. There are several others: oyster, lion's mane. They might be less reliable and less productive, but still, great things to look at and experiment with. So really fortunate today. We've got a video from Jack Stickney and his family. We've got his son Caleb and his wife Teresa here on their tree farm, talking about their mushroom growing. So I'm going to play that. Just let me know if you have any trouble hearing the sound.
Hello, my name is Jack Stickney, and we're here on the Stickney farm here in Estill County. And this is my son Caleb and my wife Teresa. And we were raising shiitake mushrooms on our farm for 33 years, and we'll show you how we do it. Welcome to our mushroom patch here. We're getting ready to talk a little bit about growing shiitake mushrooms. And shiitake mushrooms are a wonderful mushroom. They grow quite well here in Kentucky. In fact, Kentucky, we ought to be the mushroom capital of the world because we have the climate, we got the oak logs that you grow them on, and it's ideal, plenty of moisture. And someday I'm hoping we are the mushroom capital of the world. Caleb's going to talk here in a minute about how we grow our shiitakes here and where we get our logs, and Teresa's going to finish up, talk a little bit about how we eat them and how we prepare them.
So in the process of growing our mushrooms, we first harvest the logs. We get these logs through timber stand improvement, cutting out undesirable trees in the process of crop tree release. Shiitake mushrooms prefer hardwoods, and we typically use oak logs, as you can see here. After harvesting, we then drill holes in the logs, put in a mix of sawdust and mycelium into the holes, sealing them off with wax to prevent other funguses from getting in. After preparing the logs in this way, we then stack them in the forest for 6 months, as you can see here, in a cool, damp area to prevent them from drying out. After 6 months, we then lean up the logs, as you can see over here, to allow for easier picking, and after about a year, a log will begin producing. The average log produces about twice a year, typically in the spring and fall, although it's possible to get mushrooms at any time of the year. And my mom will now talk about the preparation and use of the mushrooms.
Okay, when we go to pick the mushrooms, we usually want to wait until it opens up a little bit and shows the gills. That means it's ready to be picked. And sometimes we pick so many we can't sell them all or eat them all, so we dry them in a dehydrator, and they last for a really long time. And you can just, I never soak them, you can just break them apart and throw them into eggs, spaghetti, on top of pizza. And I've also learned, since a lot of the nutrition is in the stems, I save the stems and dry those and grind them and make like a shiitake stem powder. And I'm sort of kind of starting to add that to everything that I can.
And there's 200 or 100 stems in that jar there.
Yeah, it takes 100 stems to dried to make that one little jar. And then we're also grow some yellow oysters. They're very tasty. They have a real delicate flavor, much more delicate than the shiitake. And they're great and prepared in just about anything, just like the shiitake.
And this morning we picked about a pound of shiitakes and a few oysters, and we had the shiitakes in our omelet, and it was awesome. Very good. That's my favorite way of eating them. Well, thanks for visiting us here on our mushroom patch. Have a good day.
Wow, well, I just want to give a big thanks to them for inviting us virtually to come join them. I don't know if Jack or Caleb or Teresa are on the line, but maybe if so, they can chime in during our question and answer session. And I just again want to recognize them for not only the work that they've done to promote mushroom cultivation and get people growing mushrooms, but also being Tree Farmer of the Year, many other kind of award-winning woodland management work that they've done. So thanks again for sharing that with us. And then kind of to follow up on that, I just wanted to share a quick video that I made for you all showing some of the steps that are involved in what the Stickneys just talked about. So here I'm showing kind of how to inoculate your own shiitake log. So I've got an oak log here. And you can see it looks good, it's clean, it's got no major holes in it or anything. And then I'm using a modified angle grinder to drill some holes. Now that's fast, much faster than a regular drill, but you can certainly use that too. And spacing those out, because the next step is that I want to get some of that shiitake fungus inside of there. So I talked about the vegetative growing structure, the mycelium. So I'm actually putting that mycelium in those holes. That's sawdust with the shiitake fungus in it. And you can buy that, it's called Spawn. And I'm using a special inoculation tool to get it in those holes. And then the next step is to wax over those holes. And here you can see I've got a great assistant with me, joining me to do some of that waxing. But just putting a little bit of wax over each one, that keeps those holes and the fungus that's in them nice and moist and prevents other things from getting in there. So that's kind of a really quick overview of shiitake cultivation. And if you want to learn more, go to our website. We've got quite a few publications on shiitake mushrooms from forestry.ca.uky.edu/mushrooms. So check those out. But even if you don't have a woodland, you can grow your own mushrooms, even in your own backyard. So some of you might know Megan Bueland, who's a member of our forestry extension team. What you might not know is that she's also an accomplished backyard mushroom grower. So here are some wine cap mushrooms that she just harvested, I think just a couple weeks ago. You can see how huge they are. She also grows oyster mushrooms in buckets. You can see them there in a really nice group of oyster mushrooms that she's holding. You know, even if you don't want to, let's say, do that in your yard, I think growing mushrooms is a really fun activity for anyone, but especially for kids. So I have with us today Mary McCarty. She's the 4-H and A&R agent in Menifee County, and she's going to talk a little bit about some of her work doing mushroom activities for youth. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here and unmute Mary. Mary, would you like to turn your video on and join us, talk a little bit about what you've been doing?
I sure would. So last year at the state meeting, Ellen was there and she presented about growing mushrooms and had some that she grew. And so I'd really kind of just sparked my interest on how I could use that in the classroom. And so I have my classroom teachers for the 4-H part of my job choose a core area, and that way I get my 6 hours with them. And so my 5th graders at Menifee Elementary, they do natural resources. And so I talked to the teachers and we came up with the idea that we would do this mushroom program. And so I asked Ellen for some help, and she found me some lesson plans, and it's called the Fungus Files. And so they had all kinds of different lessons that we could pull from. And so I pulled out the state core areas that I had to meet for the teachers and just kind of rolled with it. And so the kids learned the different parts of the mushrooms. It was real fun drawing the mushroom on the dry erase board and making sure it looked like a mushroom, because I knew I lost them at that point if it didn't. But then we did a key guide for them to be able to ID the mushrooms. And so the one that I brought to the classroom actually was poisonous. So that was fun. But then I brought toilet paper in. I had different kinds of toilet paper and then also some newspaper, and the teacher divided them into groups of 3, and we inoculated our mushrooms with some spawn, and we kept them in the dark for 3 weeks. And then it was amazing. Everybody had mycelium growth on the day that we pulled them out, and then of course COVID-19 happened, and so that kind of stopped the plan of that. But the teachers let me go in and get all the mushrooms from them, and so we kind of put a little grade with them. And so the Angel Soft had the best grades, so it has more carbon in it. The newspaper didn't do as well as I thought it might, but then my FCS agent and SNAP assistant and myself, we did a Facebook Live, and we put it in one of those SNAP calendar recipes, and so we cooked with our oyster mushrooms, so that allowed us to finish the project.
I think that's just that's so great. And I love that the kids got to do an experiment with the different types of, you know, things that the fungi were growing on. Of course, now toilet paper is very high in value, but some lucky mushrooms there, right?
Yeah, but it all worked really well. The teachers just put it in a dark cabinet. I had a little sheet for the kids to work through and to document what they saw when they started watering them. And so it's like a little experiment for the kids, and they really enjoyed it.
That's wonderful. So I see that we've got a comment about the resources that you used, and I know that we can share some of those. And also, Mary and I are hoping to work together to get some of those out to you in the future so that other folks can use them. So Mary, I just want to thank you for coming on and sharing that and the great work that you are doing. So appreciate it.
No problem.
Thanks.
Yeah, Mary, thank you, really. And Ellen, thanks for working with Mary. Just another great example of our county extension agents across Kentucky out there fulfilling the needs of their community and helping our youth and helping everybody else. So, Mary, really appreciate you. A great example of some nice work. Very.
And here you can see a photo of the mushrooms that they grew right there. Pretty cool to think that you can get that from a roll of toilet paper. So a great activity, you know, for the youth or the young at heart. I just want to mention, in addition to cultivating your own mushrooms, to growing your own mushrooms, we have some great foraged mushrooms. So the commonly foraged woodland mushrooms, there are a lot, but the two most popular ones I'd say are also very easy to identify, which is important. That's going to be morel and chanterelle, which morel, the season's pretty much done. It's early spring, but chanterelles will come in the summer. Now, you really do need to be able to both find them and find them somewhere that, you know, you're finding them is allowed. So either a private property that you have permission to forage in, or a federal property that allows it, but also ID them with certainty. So you don't want to have any guesses about whether or not what you found is what you think it is. You want to be 100% certain that it is this species and that it's safe to eat. And it can be hard to identify mushrooms, but a few of the choice gourmet mushrooms are pretty easy to identify. And I'd say compared to cultivating, it's probably less consistent production, but it's also a fun thing to do. And I personally am a big fan of foraging for fun, if not for food. So just having fun, walking around the woods, taking pictures of what you see and trying to identify it just for fun. Because while most mushrooms that you see you might not want to eat, you can have a great time trying to figure out what they are and learning about them. So if you want to learn more about that, we've got a publication called Don't Eat Those Wild Mushrooms Unless You Know What You're Doing, that goes through some of the safe tips for foraging mushrooms and gives you some guidance there. I also really highly recommend this website, mushroomexpert.com. They have fantastic resources on identifying different mushrooms. Now, they, like us, don't provide information on edibility because even a mushroom that is safe for some people to eat might not be safe for everyone. You know, different people have different allergies, and some mushrooms will interact with different people's prescription drugs that they're taking. So just something to keep in mind is that, you know, mushrooms can be a little tricky with that, but at the very least, giving you some great resources for how to identify some of these species. So with that, I'm going to stop that presentation and see if there are any questions.
All right, so as you know, if you've seen the show before, if you have any questions, please type them in the chat pod and Dr. Crocker can answer any of those. But there are certain things, that I've been wondering about this whole presentation. Is there a way, an easy way to know whether a mushroom is poisonous or not?
No, there's not. Unfortunately, there's no quick test or, you know, a strip of paper or something like that that'll tell you if a mushroom's safe to eat. A lot of people will ask, oh, you know, I saw a deer had eaten some of this or an animal had eaten some of that. It must be safe to eat. No, it's not. So I'd say, unfortunately, there's no quick rule of thumb about what is and is not safe to eat across the board. Really what it comes down to is identifying something to species. So exactly what is that mushroom and is it safe for you to eat? One of the things I like to tell people who are interested in getting into foraging is to, instead of just trying to pick something and decide if you can eat it, look into what are the most common, you know, foraged mushrooms in your area. What are a couple of the species that people find? What is everything that could look like it? And how can you be 100% sure that you have eliminated any lookalikes, that you know exactly what that is? So for some mushrooms like the morels and the chanterelles I mentioned, the chicken of the woods, you can do that pretty easily. And as far as I'm concerned, you know, it's not worth it to try something if you're not 100% certain, because there are some that are deadly, deadly poisonous. There are a lot that'll make you feel pretty bad. And there are many that even if you were to eat them, you might worry about it all night and it would not be worth it. So just have confidence before you eat anything.
So we do have a question on where do you buy shiitake spores?
Where do you buy shiitake spores? So one of the things that when you're trying to grow your own shiitake, you buy spawn. It's labeled as spawn, and what that is it's not the spores themselves. It's that mycelium. It's that vegetative structure that's growing through something. The reason why you buy that is that's a much easier way to get the fungus all through the logs that you want. If you just did some spores, that would take a lot longer, and you might get other things growing that aren't actually what you want. So if you use that spawn, it can accelerate that process and ensure that what you're getting is the shiitake that you want. There are a number of great spawn producers online. And any reputable spawn producer, if you give them a call and talk with them about, where you are, what you're trying to do, they'll walk you through the process, give you great tips. And another thing that I'd say is it's kind of not a one size fits all approach. So if you were to call up a spawn producer, what you'd find is not only do they have many, many different strains of shiitake, but those strains do different things. So some of them might produce mushrooms when you soak them in water and kind of force them to fruit. So you can set up a really regular schedule. Some of them might have different preferences for when they're producing mushrooms. So that's another great reason to call up a spawn producer and say, here's my situation, here's what I'm thinking about. What would you recommend? Or maybe what have you seen work well in my area before?
So someone else would like to know if you can reuse drilled logs for producing mushrooms.
I'm not sure I understand the question, but I will say that when you get a log for a shiitake, let's say shiitake growing, it's very important that that log be in good condition and still be, really moist, not have dried out. And that's for a couple reasons. First off, the growing conditions for the shiitake, because the shiitake needs to eat that log and it's got to be the right growing conditions. But the other thing is, there are lots and lots of other fungi out there that would love to eat your log that are not shiitake. So one of the reasons why I would advise against using any logs that already have big holes in them or cuts or gashes is, those might not last as long, but also other fungi might already be in those logs as well, and they will compete with your shiitake. If reusing drilled logs, I'd steer against anything that wasn't pretty fresh because you might be wasting your time and not get the output that you want.
Okay, speaking of logs is one way to have the mushrooms, but you had a picture there with buckets. And it seems like anybody can pretty much do that one because you can go get a bucket. So how did that work?
So is Megan Bieland on? If she is, I'm going to ask her to share her screen and just tell you briefly about what she was doing, because she's been growing these at her house for the past little bit. Megan, are you around? Are you able to join us?
Hey Ellen, how are you?
Doing well. Would you tell us just briefly what you've been up to?
I've been growing oyster mushrooms and stropharia mushrooms in my yard here in Lexington. And they're both super easy to grow, but especially the oyster mushrooms are a really nice mushroom that you can grow in your own backyard, no matter how much space you have. Even if you just have like a patio or a balcony, you could grow oyster mushrooms in that area. And what I do is I use straw, just regular old bales of straw, and take that straw and put it through a cold pasteurization with water and hydrated lime to knock out some of the microbes that might already be living in that straw and could compete with my oyster mushroom spawn when I add it. And the straw as food, as substrate for the mushrooms to grow on. So you just take that straw, you cold pasteurize it and soak it for a while to kill off anything that might be on there. And then you take 5-gallon buckets and use a drill to drill holes in them. You need the holes in the buckets so that that's where your mushrooms are going to fruit out of when they're ready to finally grow. And pack those buckets full of spawn and straw, and then you wait. It usually takes about 2 to 4 weeks for the spawn to run. And what that means is when the spawn has fully colonized the straw and it's ready to start fruiting and producing oyster mushrooms for you. That 2 to 4 weeks is dependent on weather and the type of oyster mushrooms you're using. And then once you start to see all these tiny little mushrooms like pinning out of the holes in your buckets, you know that they're getting ready to fruit. And the real key then is just to make sure that you keep those buckets really nice and watered. You want to spray them down with a hose every single day, because if those tiny little mushrooms dry out, they'll never grow and become full-size mushrooms if those pins, the mini mushrooms, dry out all the way. But aside from that, it's a really easy and fun project to do at home.
So someone wants to know, what size holes do you put in your buckets?
They're not very large. It's like a quarter inch across hole, quarter to a half inch across hole with a drill bit.
We had a question from Macy about, are there some that require little to no light? Yeah, a lot of mushrooms don't need a ton of light. You know, you could grow oysters in pretty low light conditions, but when they're fruiting, they need to have a little bit of light, or you might end up with some mushrooms that didn't quite form the way you want them to. Does that ever happen to you, Megan?
Oh yeah, during the winter, sometimes I move these into a garage area, and I've lost track of them a couple times and had these very wonky, strange looking mushrooms grow.
Okay. Well, thanks so much for talking with us and letting us know a little bit about what you're doing, Megan. And we'll be sure to post some links for more information online if anybody has more questions.
There was one more, wanted to know if it could be artificial light.
Oh, artificial light. I think you're going to want some UV light, and I can't remember the amounts of that's necessary. Megan, do you, from when you do your indoor cultivation, do you have any thoughts?
You need some UV light, that's correct. And it depends upon the variety of mushroom that you're growing. Some actually require more UV light than others. Most oysters don't require a whole lot of UV light. They do need some, but not a whole lot. But there are a few strains of oysters that do require more. If you see the really showy bright pink or yellow oysters, those require a lot more UV light to achieve those really nice, highly pigmented colors.
So another I guess, point in favor of calling up a spawn producer and seeing what works for the situation that you've got, whether it's growing them on toilet paper rolls with your classroom or growing them outdoors in your woods.
All right, thank you both so much. I really appreciate the information, Megan and Ellen, for that segment. And we're going to have Ellen back here in a little bit. She's going to be talking about garlic mustard. One thing I wanted to mention about those mushrooms, those shiitake, and Ellen mentioned a little bit about it, and Caleb did as well, is that they can really be part of woodland management practices. So when you can get out there and you can remove some material, you can actually use that material to grow some of your shiitake. So it can really kind of fulfill a couple of objectives. All right, Renee, next we've got the tree of the week. We're going to be looking at the black locust, and this is going to be Laurie Thomas is presenting this, and I'll be sharing that with you all right now.
Hi, I'm Laurie Thomas with the University of Kentucky Department of Forestry and Natural Resources, and I'm here with the tree of the week, the black locust, Robinia pseudacacia. Sometimes called yellow locust, post locust, and even false acacia. It grows naturally on a wide range of sites, but does best on rich, moist limestone soils. It is a medium-sized tree, generally 40 to 60 feet tall, and can grow to 12 to 30 inches in diameter. In general, black locust trees are fast-growing but short-lived, living up to maybe 90 years. Black locust is very sensitive to competition and is classified as very shade intolerant. Black locust is native to the United States, though the extent of its original range is not accurately known. It is thought that black locust was originally found in two regions. The eastern region centered in the Appalachian Mountains, and the western region included the Ozark Plateau of southern Missouri, northern Arkansas, and northeastern Oklahoma. It is thought that there were outlying native populations that existed in southern Indiana, Illinois, Kentucky, Alabama, and Georgia. It has escaped cultivation and become naturalized throughout eastern North America and parts of the West. The showy, fragrant, whitish pea-like flowers, which do smell wonderful, are borne in 5-inch drooping racemes and appear after the leaves emerge sometime between May or June. The flowers are perfect and originate in the axils of the current year leaves and are pollinated by insects, primarily bees, and hummingbirds have been known to visit the flowers. Black locust flowers are used in honey production. The leaves are deciduous, alternately arranged on the stem, as you can see in the photo. It's got the strong yellow circle, and they are pinnately compound. And you'll see that there is one leaf that is circled with orange that shows you a pinnately compound leaf. Each leaf is between 8 and 14 inches long with 7 to 19 leaflets. The leaflets are oval with smooth entire margins. The fall color is typically greenish to yellow and not typically very showy. The leaves tend to drop early. Outbreaks of the locust leaf miner occur almost yearly. Black locust trees throughout an entire region are often defoliated, and during years of low rainfall, many trees are killed. You might have noticed these brown trees as you drive along highways and interstates. The fruit is a flattened oblong legume pod, typically 2 to 4 inches long, that ripens during September and October. The pod contains between 4 and 8 small kidney-shaped smooth seeds. The fruit opens on the tree and the seeds are dispersed from September to April. Black locust begins seed production around the age of 6, with best production between 15 and 40 years. Trees typically have good seed crops at 1 to 2 year intervals. Its seeds are rated low as wildlife food, but are used to limited extent by northern bobwhite, other game birds, and squirrels. The locust borer, which is another pest of black locust, allow heart rot fungi to enter trunks, and the resultant fungal bodies are often called artist conchs, as you can see in the center photo. Because older trees are usually infected with heart rot, woodpeckers often construct cavities in them. Nest cavities of the downy woodpecker, hairy woodpecker, and common flicker have been found in black locust. The bark of the mature tree is kind of distinctive, and it is typically gray to dark gray or brownish. It's thick with deep furrows that are heavily ridged, and some say it resembles a woven rope. Although black locust is not an important timber tree in the United States, it has been widely planted for reclamation and windbreaks, and it is an important species for wildlife cover by providing nesting, roosting, and thermal cover on newly forested sites. The wood is heavy, strong, and durable, and shrinks little upon drying. The wood is considered one of the strongest and stiffest domestic woods alongside our hickory. It is used for a wide variety of products and is planted for many specialized purposes. It is used for fence posts, mine timbers, poles, railroad ties, crates, and even novelty items. It is also an excellent firewood species. The national champion black locust is in Livingston, New York. It is 326 inches in circumference, 99 feet tall, with a 72-foot crown spread. Kentucky's champion black locust is in Oldham County, and it's 196 inches in circumference, 64 feet tall, with a 56-foot crown spread. If you'd like to know more about champion trees, go to American Forest Champion Tree National Tree Register or check out the Kentucky Division of Forestry's champion trees. Now for a few fun facts about black locust. It has root nodules that allow the trees to fix atmospheric nitrogen into a usable plant form, thus enriching the soil around the tree and overall benefiting that site, improving that soil. The young branches often have stipular spines or thorns at the base of the leaves, and those can be sharp. While not planted as an ornamental tree in the United States, it has been widely planted in Europe since it was first introduced into France in the beginning of the 17th century. Its species name, pseudacacia, means false acacia because early European settlers mistakenly thought the tree was the Old World locust tree. I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit about our black locust and get the opportunity this spring to get out in your neighborhood, a local park, or your woodland and enjoy the beauty of the black locust.
Wasn't that an interesting presentation? I really enjoyed that. And I know she mentioned you could grow mushrooms on black locust. So that was a really good segue that we didn't even have planned. So that was kind of neat.
Yeah, black locust is a really interesting tree. You know, it comes in and establishes itself on places early when there's no other species, and it kind of gets the soils ready for other trees. So it plays an important role in forest succession for sure. It is an important pioneer species throughout its range. So thank you, Laurie. Appreciate that great video on black locust. So, Renee, keep the show rolling. I think we're going to go ahead and jump on into our next segment. Again, we have Dr. Ellen Crocker's coming back with us. She's going to be talking about garlic mustard. And, one of the things we want to try to do with this show From the Woods today is to give you all useful information that you can apply in your woodlands, and maybe share with others that would want to learn how to take care of their woodlands as well. And certainly invasive plants and dealing with them is one that is an ongoing battle. And so Dr. Ellen Crocker has put together a nice video here talking about garlic mustard. And she also has a feature or special guest, Hannah Helm, who's a woodland owner, has joined Ellen in this video. So Renee, I'll go ahead and pull that video up now.
Hi, I'm Ellen Crocker with UK Forestry and Natural Resources Extension. Today we're going to be talking about invasive plants and what you can do to manage them. So I'm sitting here with a spring wildflower you don't want to see. This is garlic mustard, and as you can see, it's got these white flowers. They come and they go. So right now it's blooming, but give it a few weeks and you won't even notice it. This is actually the second year's growth. The first year it's a small little rosette, stays low on the ground. You might not even notice it. But in the second year it will send up this big flowering shoot, and those will produce lots and lots of seeds. So here you can kind of begin to see those seeds developing. Those will continue to mature and spread everywhere. And not too long, these leaves are going to turn yellow and die back, and you'll be left with those seeds that will disperse. And those seeds can last for several years in the soil and just form really dense sands in the understory of your woodland. They can be a real problem, and they can inhibit the growth of other plants that you want to be seeing. So you're not going to see your spring wildflowers and other things coming up if you've got a dense stand of garlic mustard. There's several different ways you can manage garlic mustard, and it really depends on your situation. But one of the most common and easiest to manage ways is to just pull it up. Now, you do have to bag it when you pull it up, because even if you pull that plant up and put it back on the ground, those flowers will continue to develop into seeds, even after the plant is pulled up. Another thing to keep in mind is that every time you pull up that plant, it creates a little disturbance, which is a perfect place for new garlic mustard seeds to come and germinate and establish in the future, which you don't want. So if you are pulling it up, you've got to get over 95% of the flowering heads in order to have a net positive impact. So I've got a landowner here with me today who's doing a fantastic job of managing her garlic mustard, and she's going to tell you a little bit about it.
Hi, I'm Hannah Helm, and I live on 50 acres in northern Franklin County in what I call Greater Peaks Mill. And when I was 59, I got to start living my dream. And I have these woods that are kind of overgrown. There's a few nice spots, but I'm doing what I can to restore the health of these woods. And one of my passions is pulling garlic mustard. And some people consider that a chore, but I am thrilled by finding a new wildflower. Every year it seems like I find some new wildflower I've never seen before that I wouldn't have seen if I hadn't been off trail pulling garlic mustard. And I get to listen to the migrating songbirds, and actually I consider pulling garlic mustard one of my fun spring activities, strange as that might sound.
Thanks for joining me today. There are lots of great resources on our website about how you can manage your invasive plants. Be sure to check them out.
And again, thank you, Dr. Crocker, for doing another video. But if you have any questions, please put them in the chat pod, and she can get right to them. But one thing I wanted to know, Dr. Crocker, so if you pull garlic mustard this year, does that mean it won't come back next year?
Oh no, this is a long-term fight against the garlic mustard. Mm-hmm. So it's going to have to happen every year. multiple times even in a given season. And I see that we've got Hannah Helm on the line with us. So Hannah, if you want to unmute yourself, you could say a few words. But I know that Hannah has been out fighting her garlic mustard all spring. So kind of taking regular hikes, looking for it, because not every plant will develop at the exact same time. And some will send up a shoot a little bit early, some will send up some late. So Hannah, did you want to say a few words? And also, huge thank you to Hannah for having me out there and just for her great woodland management and caring about her woodlands.
Well, Ellen, it was a great time having you out here and social distancing and helping me with my garlic mustard pulling project. I've been pulling for over 2 months, and it amazes me that in areas where I pull, I will go back a week or two later and I will find more plants. And it's interesting, the longer you pull in an area, then you tend to see smaller plants that are a little harder to see. So anyway, it's interesting to watch the garlic mustard evolve as you pull.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, you've been doing this for quite a few years, and not just you, but your neighbors are also on board, and sometimes even hire groups of people to walk your woods and pull garlic mustard, which I think gets to the key issue with pulling garlic mustard as the management tool, is that you've really got to get over 95% of those flowering heads to have a positive impact. And you've been doing that for several years, right, Hannah?
Yes. Let's see. I personally have been pulling for at least 10 years, and my neighbor, and I do some, have been hiring people for, I'm going to say, 3 or 4 years, and that has really had an impact. And it's one of those things, if you see a plant or two, get on it. If you let it go, those big plants like you were showing, they throw out thousands of seeds. And yeah, the 95% I had not heard before, but I also wonder a little bit if, even though maybe I'm pulling up some old garlic mustard seeds, I'm also maybe pulling up seeds of other wildflowers that have been lying dormant, because it seems like, as I said, I see a few more each year in areas where I'm pulling garlic mustard. So I don't know.
And I loved that. I loved being out in the woods with you and seeing, all the wildflowers and plants that were coming up. As you mentioned, it's a chore, but it's kind of a fun one. And I see someone in the chat was talking about, I made garlic mustard pesto this year. And yes, you can, it's an edible plant, and you can make pesto from those shoots as they come out. So maybe a chore that we can find some silver linings in enjoying, but trying to get it out and trying to have the healthy woodlands that we want. So thanks, Hannah. Appreciate you being on and joining us today.
Thank you.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Hannah and Dr. Crocker. Certainly appreciate that. Renee, it made me think this could be a great family activity, right?
It could.
Family out there, and you all could kind of sweep your woods and get it like that. So maybe something to think about going forward. Well, Renee, we've done it again. We've kind of gone through a whole nother show of From the Woods today, and I really appreciate everybody hanging with us. It's been a great show. I really appreciate all our guests.
Definitely. We appreciate all the time that they take to help us produce this show and give us videos and PowerPoints and things like that. So don't forget, though, if you ever miss a show and, I got in too late or what have you, I wanted to watch that segment, you can always go to FromTheWoodsToday.com and get that information. We post links. We have the videos, individual videos on our YouTube channel as well. So you can always go there and find that.
All right. So, folks, thank you all again for being with us. We are so delighted to have you with us. We have a great show next week as well. On May 27th, we're going to have Dr. Jonathan Larson. He is a entomologist here at the University of Kentucky. He's going to be talking about ticks. And as we get out in the woods and we see ticks, he's going to be telling us what to be looking for and kind of how we can manage some of that. And we're also going to have another tree of the week. We're going to be talking about black cherry. So Join us next week, May 27th at 11 a.m. from thewoodstoday.com. And we certainly appreciate you all being with us. As a general reminder, County Extension agents, staff, volunteers, and specialists are encouraged to stay on after this episode ends. And we'll have a little debrief with you all about some extension-related activities. So again, thanks to everyone for being with us. And we'll look forward to seeing you all next week.
Yep. You all have a great day.